Thanks for coming out here today. My name is Shawn Kelly. My wife Amy and I own Crunchy Mama Farms out in Alvord, Texas. That's Wise County, about an hour from here. So we are a fairly local farm for y'all. But what we do is we sell our meat in a little bit different manner than most farms. We actually do whole animal harvest classes. So back in 2020, back in the days when my wife and I owned a software company, we saw the empty shelves at the grocery stores. We saw year backlogs to get your beef processed, and we're raising beef at our farm at that time. And it was, what, 8 to 10 months in order to have a pig processed. So really, you needed to have a processing date for your pig around the time, if not before, it was born. So that really didn't bode well for the strength of our food system. And I looked at things, I saw things online where they were culling animals and burying them. It was really a tragic thing, and I was thinking, you know, back in the day, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, they would have went to those farms, they would have offered them some money, they would have bought that hog, harvested it, even if they just ground it into sausage, they would have food and not care about what was on the shelves at their grocery stores. And I know a lot of restaurants had a hard time during that period as well. And there were different things through the Restaurant Association of New York where they were teaching chefs how to do whole animal processing for their restaurants so that you can participate deeper in the food system and not have to necessarily wait for all the processing to be done off-site. So I went to work at a small processor up in Munster, Texas. I worked on the kill floor. I worked at the cutting table. We would put through about 14 beef a day, about 6 hogs a day, and maybe a half a dozen sheep or goats. And when you're doing those numbers, and there's only like 4 guys on the kill floor, you become pretty darn proficient pretty fast. So the building we were building out as our winery took a little bit of a U-turn. And it became our small butcher shop. So we made some changes to the overall construction design of the building. We built with ICF blocks, so it's very energy efficient. And Crunchy Mama Farms was born, where we started doing chicken classes in 2021, teaching people about pastured chicken and how to process them. And then in January of 2022, we had Mark Baker from Michigan come down. He was one of my mentors, and we did a lard pig meat hog showdown featuring red wattles versus Mangalitsa hogs. And when we do our classes, we start with an animal on pasture. We harvest it as a class. So don't expect to show up and there's meat hanging in the cooler, because it's a live animal out on pasture. We teach you humane harvest. We do scald and scrape, which I'm absolutely thrilled, by the way, that you guys found a hog with the skin on. That's a very tough thing. So kudos for the folks here that went out and found this, because normally in North Texas the standard is to skin it out. But in our classes, we'll harvest the animal. We'll partner with chefs like Brian Santiago here, and Brian's going to be helping me a little bit today, talking about some of the things he would do with these different cuts. And then in our class, we'll start with an organ meat dinner the first night. As we go into the second day, we produce additional cuts. Some of those cuts go to the chefs, and they'll do their own cooking event where maybe you're more interested in learning how to cook. You can float between the two. You can learn how to cut, you can learn how to cook, and our goal is for you to be able to utilize the entire animal. With a pig, we would go into additional value adds such as curing. We'll get into copa, we'll get into bacon, we'll talk about prosciutto, culatelle ham. If we have a lot of back fat, we'll get into things like lardo and different forms of charcuterie and salumi, where you're actually going to have shelf-stable meat, and it's just this layer of luxury that we generally don't find in the American food system. But at least my ancestors in Europe, they really knew what to do and how to preserve things, not because they were snooty, it's because they were poor and they didn't have refrigeration. So they would use things like salt and smoke and doing things such as confit, where they were preserving the meat to get through the lean times and feed their family. And it just turned out that they developed these recipes over centuries into something that we see today, and we're just blown away at how amazing it is. So for example, in our pig class, what are we going to do? What are some of the things we would do with a pig like this during our class?
Typically, we will break it down.
Introduce yourself, friend.
Sorry, everybody. I'm Chef Brian Santiago. I am local here to Fort Worth. I kind of go everywhere, though. I partner up with Shawn Kelly here. We do some pretty amazing things out on Crunchy Mama Farms. Like he said, we utilize everything, nose to tail, the entire animal. We've done everything from stir fry with the ears and the liver and the heart and everything, and we break it all down. We do really succulent, supple cuts with the Boston over here. It's very delicious, very tender, long cooks. Shawn is infamous for the bacon, but one time we did ramen, and he argues that it's a better use for the pork belly. We use the trotters. We'll take those and we'll cook them down in the stock. They make really luxurious and healthy, good for you stocks. Everything, really. Anything you can imagine.
All right, so we've got a half of a pig here. Should we start breaking them down?
Yeah, break her down.
All right, so the first thing we're going to start on is we're going to shake that pig's hand, all right? We've got the skinned out pig. Oh my gosh, they even pulled the nails, which at our class, if you join us for our classes, and we do have a class coming up June 13th through 15th, that is one of the things. After the scald and scrape, we would pull the nails, and then you've got to lubricate that joint, and then you're going to get in here. You're going to get that satisfying snap. Hear that?
Heard it.
And what's this, Brian?
That's our trotter.
That's our trotter. So what would you do with stuff like that?
Trotters are really high in collagen. They really like to break down into beautiful, rich stocks. They're typically used for things like pho. That's what you would be familiar with.
All right, my mic fell off of me. Let me just adjust this real quick.
I can still hear you.
Can you hear me now? Okay, so we pulled the trotter. That's our first cut. Coming here, this next one, what do we have here? I'm testing Brian, by the way, because Brian, although he's participated as the chef in a lot of our classes, he's never actually taken the class before. So what's this right here? All right, so we've got this right here. This is our hock. And what we're going to do is we're going to feel up that arm, and we're going to feel that elbow right there, and we're going to cut with our knife right around here, right behind that elbow, all the way around. I'm going to put the knife away because now I'm at the bone. And we're going to take our saw at this point. And this saw cuts on the push. You hold that. It's a bit slippery up here. So, and then I've got my bone dust scraper.
What do you do with that hock, Shawn?
With these, you could cure it. What I would rather do would be cure it, smoke it, split pea soup.
Split pea soup.
If you're not going to cure it, I'd smoke that, get some spices going. I have a feeling that you can source some spices right here. This would be awesome in with some beans, awesome with some soups.
Collard greens.
Collard greens, there you go. Delicious. Okay, so now we're getting into bigger things. We've gotten rid of the front part of the leg there. There's a couple ways we can look at this. American butchery generally utilizes a bandsaw. Everything in America, you see those cuts in the grocery store, they're all squared up. All of your steaks are perfect, okay? Generally what Americans are gonna focus on, they're gonna go 1, 2, 3 and cut between ribs 3 and 4. That's going to give you a very small shoulder, and it's going to accentuate this middle area of the pig, which is our loin and our belly. What do we turn the belly into?
Bacon.
Bacon. Okay, those are your main money cuts. You're going to sacrifice the shoulder, also known as the what?
Boston.
The Boston. Why do they call it that?
Because it's high on the hog. That was good eating over. It's
high in the hog. Back in the day, they would preserve meats, and the sailors would go out for months, if not years at a time. And the actual container that the pork was in was called a butt. So they would put pork in the butt for the sailing journeys. The thing is you didn't know what was going to be in that pork butt. It could be all trotters. It could be all heads. It could be a whole pig broken down. And what they started doing in Boston was they started standardizing so that it was a pork shoulder. In particular, it would be the high end of the shoulder area. So you're getting a nice, meaty, fatty, delicious hunk of meat over and over again in that same barrel. So what you started having is a branding effect where all the sailors are like, no, we want some of the Boston butts. Forget all this stuff because I don't want to be eating heads for 12 months out at sea. Okay? But we're gonna cut this. Now, 1, 2, 3, 4, between 3 and 4 would be our American style. In my classes, most of my students are planning to cut the pig at home, and they don't have a bandsaw. So what we'll generally have them do is they'll go further down and they'll cut between 5 and 6. And here's why we have them do that. There's less bone to cut through. The area of the shoulder, especially on a bigger animal, is going to be softer, and generally you're going to be going through cartilage. So it's a lot easier with hand tools to go through that. Now if you're in Italy, what they're going to do is they're going to take it even further back and they're going to cut between 7 and 8, because in Italian butchery, what they're focused on is right here. They don't want the whole pork butt. They want this musculature in here, which is the coppa. And that's their money cut. In fact, one of my friends sells coppa for about $225 a pound. So that's your money cut if you're doing Italian salumi, okay? So it all depends on what you want to get out of this pig. And here's my take on it, guys and gals, especially if you're just getting started into butchery. There's no wrong way to do it except the way that ends up wasting meat. As long as you're utilizing all this, you're doing better than our industrial food system by and large, okay? So if you make a mistake, turn it into sausage. Have we all paid for sausage before? Heck yeah. Sometimes like that's the goal. I've had entire pigs get turned into sausage, old breeding sows and whatnot.
Old chorizo.
Chorizo, turn the whole thing into chorizo. Yeah, we did that last fall. So the only wrong way is the way that ends up in waste, right? But I'm gonna do my, my homestead breakdown, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm gonna cut between 5 and 6 here. I'm gonna take that right to the table. Cutting between 5 and 6 is gonna get me past that sternum, whereas if I cut between 3 and 4, I'd have to break through that bone right there. Do a little saw work here, hold that pig. And when you're through with the saw, you put the saw down and continue with the knife. All right. So, now we're starting to break things apart. I'm starting to see what the pork chops are gonna look like. I'm starting to see what the bacon, if you come around here, you can actually see that we could probably pull some bacon off of this one, and I'm gonna go through it. It's a little bit of a small side for bacon, but we're gonna go attempt it still. But what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna bone out this front area of the pig. Up top, you've got the pork butt. Down below, and it'll give away, you've got this little leg bone here. That's the picnic. So we're gonna get our knife, get in our butcher's grip. We're gonna rip this down here. And whatever I'm butchering, I want gravity to do its thing. Always have a pull force. If you're just sawing on stuff, you're working too hard, you're losing too much meat. Let that pull force, let that gravity do its thing. We'll come right down here. I've got a few little bits of cartilage that I'm going to end up removing. Then you run right down. That blade bone right there. The spinous processes. And this can go, we could have somebody, if we're working a boning table, take that little bit off. That is great for stock. We're going to come in here, just kind of clean this up real quick, get rid of any little bits of bone or cartilage. And again, I'm up here in public. I'm not able to focus totally on ripping this because I'm trying to talk to everybody here. But here we go. We've removed that rib cage. We've removed the bones from the neck and the spine. And right about halfway, we're going to see where that copa muscle is starting and running further down the back. We're going to separate this. And what we're going to run into is we're going to have a little bit of blade bone for the shoulder. That's fine. What do you like to do with that blade bone when you've got a pork butt cooking? What does that tell you?
Oh, it's going to be nice and tender.
Don't you use that as like a timer?
Ooh. Oh, when it comes out?
When it comes out clean, your pork butt's done. Thank you. All right, get through that. Beautiful. Look at this. So, here's our first cut that I'm just really gonna geek out about. This is a full pork butt from this little pig. You've got the shoulder blade bone in there. You can see it right here. More importantly, you've got the skin on. Now, Brian, what would you do? What would you do with this?
So with this cut in particular, with that skin on, us Puerto Ricans, we love this stuff right here. We'd score it up real nice and we slather it with the sofrito and we do a nice slow roast on it. And it just gets really tender and supple, and then you have these beautiful pork skin chips on top.
Crispy skin.
Crispy skin.
Let that lard just render out. Fry it in its own fat. Yeah, I'd take that home for dinner tonight. Check that out. All right, so we're gonna put that in here. Then you've got this cut. Do you remember what this one is? This is our picnic. So that's our Boston. This is our picnic. Now you could truss this up and get a reasonably even cook on it, but it's always gonna cook less evenly than that upper part, that pork butt. So this is the picnic. Also on this, because we did that homestead cut where we went further back than a normal American industrial cut, we've got that little triangle of bacon starting off here. And when you do ramen, this is what I give you. So I'm not shorting my students any of their prime bacon. We're just pulling this little bit off. But this here is, we would typically utilize this for sausage. You've got a lot of good meat, you've got fat, you have skin on here. And there are actually a lot of sausage recipes that will call for adding the skin in. And you can check out books from Brian Polson, Bruce Adele. There's plenty of different books out there on sausage, and some of them will call for that skin, so don't necessarily waste that. But that would be our picnic. We could bone this out for sausage if we wanted to kill a little bit of time, but we're gonna respect everybody's time here today. But that would be, I would use this for sausage. And again, any of these bones, throw them into the stock pot. This is gold, especially if you're doing what I'm doing and paying or raising a heritage breed hog out to a year or more. You want to use every little bit of it, and that bone broth is absolutely fantastic, great nourishment. And as long as you pour it into the jars hot, it's going to form that fat cap at the very top of it, and that stuff will keep for months in your refrigerator. So that's our pork butt. So moving on down, how are we doing for time? What time is it? We're a half hour in. Nice. Okay, so we've got our ham, we've got our pork belly, our loin and sirloin here. Let's get into pulling this down. We should probably pull the tenderloin. We're not doing like pig T-bones or anything like that.
Yeah, tenderloins that are pretty popular.
All right, we're gonna pull, you want tenderloins?
Yeah, it's pretty popular.
All right, when Chef says he wants tenderloins, what he wants is this inside muscle right here. It's fairly thin and small compared to the loin that you'll find at Costco. Everyone sees those big pork loins at Costco. They're this big around and they're about that long. That's actually the loin right here. This is the tenderloin. This is on the inside of the animal. It's going to be the most tender cut on any quadruped. Basically, it's using that muscle when it's making love and whatnot. So a fairly tender muscle, especially something this age. So we're going to get in here. We're going to take our time. You're going to use a little bit of pull force. Again, it's not just cutting. It's pulling. It's using gravity. And we're just going to use a little pull force, and we're going to work our way down. You got to be careful, because if you pull too hard, you can tear this muscle.
So you've done this before, Shawn?
Delicious. And that's going to come right down into the H bone. It'll terminate down there, and we can pull that out. All right. And I am kind of rushing here, but what we've got is you've got this tenderloin. We have some glands here we're going to pull off and remove. Let me adjust the space here so I can come over here and work a little bit easier. But we're going to pull these glands off. If you ever look at the grocery store at chorizo ingredients, you're going to see a lot of glands and lymph nodes and stuff like that. So it's not all waste. And then what we're going to do is I'm getting lost in here. We've got to pull all this connective tissue off. So we'll take our time. Normally we're going to say fat's our friend, but in this case, that connective tissue is underneath the fat. And it's going to take the most tender cut and make it tough. Now here's that little muscle that runs along the spine. What do we call that? We've got the chain here. Now we started playing around with this when we had Mazda. Yeah. Tell us who Mazda was.
Oh man, Mazda was our Texas Wagyu.
Texas Wagyu. What's a Texas Wagyu?
Oh, a very delicious steak. Is what that is.
He was part Japanese, part Angus. This is a small pig, so I don't have much in the way of the chain here. But there's a tough bit of connective tissue that runs down that. And then you have some really tender meat. On a big beef, this is actually a pretty large hunk of meat. And it's pretty nice because it's like perfect shish kebab size. And normally people will throw it in a grind, or they'll think, well, it's all this connective tissue. I've heard a lot of chefs would actually just throw it into the trash. And
which is a mistake, because it's
tenderloin.
It's tender and delicious.
It's tenderloin. Now this guy towards the end here, we're getting into, that's all connective tissue. But I mean, that is solid meat. That can go into the grind with the way meat prices are these days. You want that. And we're just going to go down here. And I'm trying to keep us good for time. But we've got all of this silver skin, which is not our friend. I'm going to switch to a sharper knife. I love working with student-used knives when the students were the last ones and I had to run out early this morning. been at grad parties all day.
Grad parties.
Grad parties. But we can get in there.
You're doing a swell job, Shawn.
Oh.
So we always remove all the silver skin. That is a part that is not digestible by the human body. So you definitely want to remove it.
Well, it's going to ruin your whole bite. It's going to ruin the whole experience. Get rid of it whenever you can. And it's a time-consuming bit. And there's still more we can go into here. I don't know who's using this pig next, so I'm going to be the best that I can be as giving them
I think you have an audience member who wants some of your pig.
good ingredients. Who's going to eat that pig? Is he going to eat the pig? He wants to come over here. He's like, I want that tenderloin that you're spending all the time on. Jacking your jaw about. Anyway, that's our tenderloin. We could put a little bit more time into that. We're going to put that guy right there. So we've removed that. We started pulling this belly off. And you'll note that I followed the seam on the leg. Can people see that okay? I'm not seeing what they're seeing, but hopefully they can see that okay. Where I've come in here and I've followed that leg. And then what we can do, we've got our tail sticking out. What's cut is this?
Is our prosciutto.
Ham. Ham, girl. So we've got that tail. They gave us the whole tail. I love that. And we're going to make this cut mark right about here. And then I'm going to lop that tail off. And then I'm going to cut through here. When I'm done going through the bone, go right back to the knife. Right there. So now I've separated the ham. Got that little tail nub. We'll get rid of that. I can go in there. And then I'm just going to go home with this right now. So now we've got the sirloin, the loin, the pork belly. What you can see here is you can see where the tail was, and it comes down, and then all the spine and everything goes flat. So we would come to the point where that changes, and that's our 0 joint, and we would come to the edge here, and that's where we can actually separate the sirloin, and we can take that right to the table. But before we even do any of that stuff, what we're going to do is we're going to separate this whole long loin from the belly and the ribs. So we're going to take a look, and we're going to let the pig let us know where to cut. And I'm going to show you guys here. When I'm looking at it, here's our pork chop, and that size pig, we're actually getting a pretty decent sized pork chop. And what I like to do is where it all kind of comes together into this point, that's going to be my cut point right there. I'm going to mark that. And then I'm going to go on this side, and I've got my sirloin. I can see where things are really all together here, and I'm going to make a mark right below that. And then it's time to rip. So what I can do is I can cut that to the table, and I'm just going to do a light cut just to mark my path. And once I've done that, I can cut this all the way until I start hitting my false ribs there. I'm going to get that out of the equation. And now we're going to saw. The saw cuts on the push. This is the most frustrating cut on the whole beast. And this pig's starting to get warm. So it's like trimming a booger.
Always cut it cold.
But nice and easy. And ideally, you want to keep going all the way till you're through. Because if you get to the point where you're almost through, and then you can't wait any longer, you go push and you snap it, what you've done is you've just caused the ends of those ribs that weren't fully cut through yet to become jagged and sharp. And if you're gonna leave these rib bones in and vac bag them, what's gonna happen to your vac bag?
It's gonna pop.
It's gonna go pop. And then you're gonna have all this sad, freeze-dried meat in your freezer. So you wanna give it as smooth as a cut as you can. I mean, we're using hand saws here. It's not gonna be perfect, but you can get it pretty darn good. And you look at you, you're ahead of me there. I'm gonna tidy that up. Doing the best I can here. Keeping it pretty.
Doing a swell job, Shawn.
Oh, all right. So, we've got our loin here. I'm pretty happy with it, Dana. Thank you. That's fantastic. All right. So this is my happy place right here. I have a love affair with bacon. I absolutely love bacon. I love curing my own bacon and teaching people how to cure bacon. I have a video on YouTube that takes you through the whole bacon curing process over a 3-video thing. And I think we were roasting a pig in La Caja, China at the same time. But what we've got is we've got our ribs going here, and you can feel the end of those rib bones. And then if you feel further in, what you're gonna notice is that there's a little bit of tough material in there, and that's cartilage. Because this pig was alive and it would breathe. And when it would breathe, it would expand its chest, and then it would contract and it would breathe in and out. And that cartilage lets it do that. If it was all solid bone, it wouldn't be able to do that. So what we have to do is we have to come through and keep that cartilage on our slab of ribs, because who here likes cartilage in your bacon? No, nobody wants cartilage in your bacon.
Chewy.
Chewy, don't be like that. All right, so with the bacon, especially on a fairly small animal, what we have to notice is those ribs aren't perfectly flat. There's a curvature to them. So as I'm drawing my knife down that slab of ribs, if I keep that initial curvature, that's fine for that swipe. But when I take the next one, I'm gonna eventually start running my knife tip into the table. And then we have holy bacon, which I'm not even gonna go there. It's just not a good thing.
Take it to church.
Yeah, but you're not taking that bacon to church. They'll laugh at you. So we're gonna come through here, right through the ribs, and we're gonna push the tip of our knife up as we're running it along the bone. Now for a pig, if this pig were a little bit smaller than this, what we would have done is we wouldn't even have tried to do bacon. And for those of you that hunt wild hogs, which there's a lot of in Texas, and they make delicious sausage usually, sometimes they don't. Meaty ribs are the way to go. I've yet to have a wild hog that gave me good bacon. But we're just gonna come through here, and it's a bit slippery. And I'm cutting past the end of that solid rib because I want that cartilage to leave with the slab of ribs and not stay behind with my bacon. And you can see that cartilage right there. And it's staying at the ribs, it's not leaving with the bacon. And you can even do a little scoring line when you know you're in the clear and come through and out. And then we can trim this up. If you want to do St. Louis style ribs, you can get rid of all that cartilage and have this squared up really nice. And there you've got your ribs. I don't like leaving silver skin on the ribs. And we've got that, and there should be an orange handled hook over there. So what you can do is you use your little orange handled hook or knife tip, really whatever you got going. You get that started, and then paper towel has these magic properties typically where it will really let you get a hold on that silver skin so you can rip it off. Because everybody's had poorly butchered ribs that are sticking in their teeth, and it's because nobody took the time to clean that up. Now you've got a little bit of skirt left on here. On a long cook, that's gonna get tough. You might want to trim it off now. Otherwise, I mean, it's a little tiny slab of ribs. We can clean this up a little bit more, but you've got your spare ribs right there. And then that leaves us with this, which is our pork belly. With our pork belly, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna square that up. Now, this meaty, real chunky, fat clump area at the tail end, I call it the fish tail end of the bacon slab. Don't toss that out. That's fantastic sausage meat. You've got a lot of meat. You've got a lot of fat. You can skin the skin out, leave it on. It's all up to you. And then as far as our bacon goes, there's a little line here that's typically along where the nipples are. And it's really not going to be the best slicing bacon. So you can rip that if you want to. If it were a bigger pig, you would see more of a variation with the fat and less meat. With this guy, we're looking pretty good with meat all the way to the end, so I'll leave that. If you're putting this on a meat slicer, ideally you want to get this as squared up as you can, and then you're going to cure it. Now for curing at home, what I do, I married Amy Kelly, the Crunchy Mama. My wife hates it when I use pink salt, and if she's not around, I'll use it. I'm gonna get a more consistent finish. She doesn't like the dyes and stuff that are in this. Fine. If you're not into that, then you're going uncured cured bacon. It's still gonna go through the same chemical process of adding a nitrite, except it's gonna be more natural, and typically people use celery, beets, cherry, and you see it's kind of the fad in the stores now where you'll see uncured bacon. It's gone through the exact chemical process of curing with a nitrite. It's turned pink. It gives you that flavor and texture that you associate with bacon, but they've done it with natural ingredients instead of a pink salt like this Cure number 1. And the government regulates it where you can't say that the product is cured unless it has a government-approved pink salt. Now, if you're doing more of a commercial product, they do have USDA-approved celery cures. I believe it's a Cure 508, which is a celery cure. You can buy that from butcherpacker.com and other sources. So if you want to do home-cured bacon, but have a consistent amount of nitrite, that Cure 508 is going to do the job for you. What I do for my bacon is I'll do 3% salt. We'll use a kosher salt. We do it by weight instead of volume because every kosher salt brand has different flake sizes, which is going to contribute to different volume. If you're going off of a recipe and it's calling for salt by volume, they generally are defaulting to Morton's. Morton's is the default brand if a recipe is going by volume. But you want a kosher salt, you don't want anything with iodine in it. 2.5% is your minimum. For safe curing, I go 3%. It's a good flavor and a little bit saltier than what most Americans are used to, but it's really good. It gives you that extra safety amount. We'll typically add about 1.5% brown sugar. So we're weighing this, we're adding that cure, and then take it whatever route you want to go. I'm sure there's some spice mixes here that you could add if you want to spice up your bacon. You're never wrong with a bit of garlic or some black pepper, some bay leaf. And then if you're really going to go full hippie like my wife, instead of even a Cure 508, you're going to chop up a bunch of fresh celery, throw it in a vac bag, put it in the fridge. We're not bagging up anything in an oxygen-free environment without keeping it out of the safe zone, so you have to keep it below 40 degrees. I prefer to keep it around 34, 36 degrees, and we'll do that 4.5 days per kilogram of weight. If it's a thicker cut like ham, I'll go a little bit longer. And Then we'll take this out, we'll rinse it really well. We will let it hang overnight to develop a pellicle, which is a sticky surface. And then we'll smoke this. I'll generally hot smoke it till we get an internal temp of 140. And then we put it back in the walk-in to chill. And then after it's set up overnight, we'll take the skin off. You don't have to, but I'll take the skin off. And then I'll put it through the slicer. It'll be fantastic. But I'm really glad we got that. Now, what else would you do with this?
So you're rolling it like this, we're gonna make a chashu.
Boop.
That's gonna be your ramen pork.
Tell me more. What else could you do with that?
We do pork adobo, which is pretty much a Filipino dish that's drowned. You sear it off and slow simmer it in a nice soy sauce and sugar mixture. You could do, what is it, pancetta? So if you don't smoke it and you roll it up, you truss it, and it's basically the same process, but you skip the smoke and you roll it up, you truss it nice and tight, you cure it the same way, and then you have a pancetta. That's basically Italian bacon right there.
Now, if you're not going to go through a cook step, what do we typically do?
So we salt hang it.
You hang it.
We cure it.
Yep, so we'll cure it. If we're going to hang it without actually going through the cooking kill step, it's been on cure for the allotted time. We're going to take it off. We're going to rinse it really well. Don't be like, hey, I like salt. I'm just going to rinse some of it off. No, rinse the heck out of it. Get the salt off. And then you're going to hang it. You're going to hang it roughly room temperature, 60 to 70 degrees. You're going to weigh it. Weigh it, and you're going to write down the weight of what it was the day it came off a cure. You're going to hang it somewhere where flies can't get to it. Maybe put a lot of pepper, black pepper on the outside. And I'll usually use like a ham sock or something like that, or truss it. And we'll hang it at 60 to 70 degrees, 60 to 70% humidity. There are systems that you can buy, or check out Two Guys in a Cooler. They're a great YouTube channel. And once you've lost 30% of your weight, that is water weight, at that point it's safe to eat raw. So that's when you have prosciutto, capicola, things like that, pancetta. Those are completely raw. Now you can add them to cooked dishes, or eat them as lunch meat.
Stick them on a slicer and eat them.
Have a glass of wine, some cheese, delicious.
If you come to a class, you're going to have copa on the slicer. That's a real treat from Shawn Kelly.
All right. So we've got this loin here. Here's the tail end. We're coming down. We hit that zero joint. We've already broken here. I think I was able to get all the way through. Nope, not all the way through. So, few strokes of the saw. And I'm going to separate the sirloin right here. Now, if this were a bigger hog, I might consider boning this out. I might consider sawing through it again, making some roasts, some sirloin steaks. You're not wrong with any of those. What I have here is a fairly small sirloin. One thing to make note of is we're looking at a whole animal. Your eyes start seeing hunks of meat and thinking, oh, that's puny, when in reality this might be dinner for 1 to 2 people. I would leave this whole. I could put that in as a sirloin roast. That's a nice cut of meat. Now we've left with this. What is this? So now we're in our loin, okay? So we've got this skin-on loin. There's not going to be too much fat under it, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to skin this out. And the knife I'm using here is a 6-inch boning knife. I'm going to touch it up real quick. The 6-inch boning knife, we're just using Victorinox boning knives. About 25 bucks. You can get them on Amazon, Walton's, really just about anywhere. And they'll do the job for just about anything you need to do. If we're on the kill floor, I've got a lamb skinner, and we'll generally do scald and scrape using a lamb skinner. I don't really like the little hand, the cowbell things, the bell scrapers. They don't work as nice as a knife for shaving. But what I'm doing here is I'm putting tension on the skin, always tension when you're skinning, and I'm running my knife down. and I'm just skinning this out. Now, if this were an older pig, say this was about a 250 pound to 300 pound pig, we might be looking at 2 inches of back fat on here. Don't throw away the back fat if you're harvesting your own pig. You can use it as a cured item called lardo. You can cut it into sausage. If you're a deer hunter, you can cut it into venison sausage. It's fantastic. This right here is also your prime skin if you want to make chicharron. Okay? Who here likes pork rinds? Dude, homemade pork rinds are fantastic. Now here's the deal with pork rinds. Pork rinds, I like to make sure all the fat's filleted off of it. There wasn't much going on this guy. And then I'm going to cut them into strips. So, cut them into strips. That's a nice strip right there. And then, if you've ever filleted a fish, you know this process. You're just going to run that knife right along the skin and get any of that fat that's clinging on to the skin layer. And you're seeing here, it didn't look like there was that much, but that's significant when it comes to doing up pork rinds, because you want all the fat off of there. And then what you're going to do is you're going to cube that skin up, do the whole thing, particularly any of the skin on the back of the animal. You cube these up, you're going to put them in water. And you're going to boil these for about 2 hours. And what that boil is going to do, it's going to render any of the fat that's left on this off, and it's going to tenderize the skin, okay? Pork skin gets tender when it's in hot water. Same ideology of when you're doing your pernil. What are you doing when you're cooking that pernil?
Just roasting it forever.
Pull it up to your mouth more.
Oh, we're just roasting it forever.
You're roasting it.
We're rendering out all the fat.
So you're braising it, you're softening it, and then you score the skin and you bring up the temp, and then it's frying in its own fat. So this, you're going to boil this for those 2 hours. You're going to fish them out, use some kind of strainer. That fatty water that you boiled this in for 2 hours, don't dump that down your drain. All right? It's going to solidify almost like candle wax over the next day. And if you pour it down your drain, and then if you pour some lye down your drain, you've just created bar soap in your drain. I have a friend that did it with a 6-inch below slab pipe, and his wife won't ever let him live that down. But you boil it, and then you're going to put it in your dehydrator or your oven, lowest temp that you can, and you're going to let it go until when you go to bend it, that skin snaps and breaks like glass. All right, there should be no bend to it at all. It's just a crisp, like you're breaking a piece of glass. At that point, you've got a shelf-stable protein. You keep it out of sunlight, you're going to be good to go for months and months to a year or more. When you want to then eat it, you take that hardened, dehydrated pork skin, you get some oil going, you put it in that oil, and it's going to puff up into those fluffy cracklings that you love. Hit them with some hot spice, some kosher salt, something like that. It's going to be out of this world good. So there's that skin there. This can also be used. Different sausage recipes will actually call for skin chopped up to different sizes, and then you put it through the grind with your meat. All right. So we're getting into a delicious place right here. We've got our loin. Couple things we can do here. First off, if you're looking at this, it's going to break down similar to a beef. Towards the back, we've already moved the tenderloin, so you'd have what's equivalent to your New York strip. Up in the front, you'd have what's equivalent to your ribeyes, okay? I like bone-in chops. So for these front ones, we can do that. Coming in the back here, I'm going to just rip us. And we've got this false rib here, so we have to be careful about that. We're going to come down to the spine, and I'm going to show you here. We're going to come down to the spine. Now where students go wrong is they'll hit that spine, they'll turn 90 degrees and cut out. And if you rip it out, you've lost all of this meat, and that's the widest part of your boneless chop. You don't want to do that. So you come down, and then you follow that spine either to the table, or if there's a little bit of spinous process that's sticking out, you get to that bone and you follow the bone out to the table. But I'm going to take it to right about here. So I'm going to run right down that false rib using the tip of my knife and the butcher's grip. I'm not cutting out, I'm cutting down to the table, and then I'm cutting out along the bone. And then we could take this connective tissue off if we wanted. Usually we wouldn't, because there'd be a fat cap on there. If this were a bigger pig, we'd go for about 1/4 to 1/2 inch fat cap on that pork chop. I've seen videos where the guy's got 1 inch to 2 inch fat cap on it, and that's just a mess in your pan. So what we can do here, we can cut some 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch chops. Something like that. Or we can cut it almost to the table, come back. What are you gonna do with that?
Oh, you have a nice butterfly piece.
A little butterfly chop. What would you stuff in there?
Oh man, anything. I really like a good spinach and feta mix in there.
Can people hear him? They can't hear you, brother.
Can we hear me now?
They can hear you now. Tell them what you would do with that. What are you looking at, and what would you do with that?
So with this guy right here, I really like to stuff it with any kind of cornbread stuffing normally, but any stuffing that you like will do. I actually really like spinach and feta up in a butterfly chop, and then you just stuff it, you close her up, and then you sear it this side down, and you get that nice and closed, and then you just stick it in the oven and finish it off.
All right. So we've got some butterfly chops. We've got a regular nice little pork chop here. We can throw that in our bin. What do we have here?
What, our tenderloin?
Yeah. Are those bone-in chops?
Yeah, beautiful.
Future bone-in chops. All right. Let's try not to hit the table here. Broth. All right. So now you've got the bone as a guide, and these are getting a little warm, so they're a bit floppy. But I can cut that to the table, put my knife away. Here's the part where I really wanted to bring somebody up from the audience, but the lawyers won't let me. Sorry, y'all. Let's get it on the red cutting board, because I don't want to ruin theirs. In my shop, the red cutting boards are the cleaver cutting boards. And that gives you a nice bone-in chop. And what we can do, these would be great on the smoker, or really anything. But I'll just come down. Every rib is a chop. This is always a fun part of the class, because the students will come through, and if we're on a big pig, there's a lot going on here. But we can just go right through. And of course, if you're seeing these at a grocery store, it's typically all going through the bandsaw. But you can do this with simple hand tools. You don't have to go spend $5 on a meat bandsaw or more. About $100 in gear out the door and you're feeding your family. Ain't nothing wrong with that.
That was my piece.
That's your piece?
Yeah.
You want me to just put a knife through it and you'll, oh, I went off with that one. There's always one that's the wah wah. There you go. Well, that gives you some nice bone-in chops. You've had boneless chops, you've had butterfly chops. Kind of want to spread these out once we get everything done to show the full harvest. And then, last but not least, we've got the ham. So right here, skin on. If we're using this for prosciutto, we wouldn't cut through by the Achilles here. We would string this up. And the reason is once you start cutting through, you're leaving new areas for bacteria to start spreading in, and then you're in this race to the stifle joint where is your cure gonna make it or is the bacteria gonna make it? And that's not a race we wanna lose, okay? Because, whoo!
Because botulism kills.
Yeah, all kinds of bad things. So we don't wanna cut that through that if we're doing a full prosciutto. In fact, at a lot of places, they'll leave a little bit of the hair on the leg here so you know what kind of pig it was. It's an extra proof to show people what it was. But what we have in here, we've got the H-bone and we've got the femur. And we're just gonna do a full breakdown because I wanna show people the extent of where we can take this. So the H-bone is one of your more difficult boning jobs. We've got this little bit of meat inside the H-bone, which if this were a beef, this would be the oyster steak, and it's become one of my favorites for beef. We carve that out. That would end up just going for grind for a pig. And then it's gonna give us access. There's a hole that goes right through here. And then there's our femur. And what we're dealing with by the femur is there's actually a membrane. And we have to cut through that membrane in order to get the H-bone off the femur. Now, if you were gonna do prosciutto with this, generally as you're just learning, you're gonna leave the H-bone in because any of these little gouges that you're inevitably gonna make could be extra new little paths for bacteria to go through. And again, you're in a race against the bacteria. So, I don't know if you can see that here, but there's our femur ball right there. I've pulled most of the H-bone out of the ham, and now I'm gonna cut through, releasing that femur. And there's our H-bone. That'd be great for the stock pot. Nice little bone there to work with. And then we can skin this out if we want. We've got our rear leg, which we can use this for more stock, really anything we want. But your connection point is gonna be up in here. It's where the kneecap would be. And we have, it's hard to see with the skin on. Let me skin this out and I'll be able to take you through and show you where the knuckle is. And then we'll break down the round into its 3 parts. But we'll just skin all this out. And the skin from the leg isn't gonna be something that's gonna be as sought after for chicharron as the stuff that you pulled off of the back. But you still could do things with it. At a minimum, you could throw it into the rendering pot. because about 10% of the fat on your animal is tied up in the skin. So start it on render and get as much of that harvest as you can.
You do such a beautiful job of this.
All right. Bless you. All right. So now that I've removed the skin, we can start seeing our seam roadmap starting right here. If this were hanging on the rail, you can get a hook in there nice and easy. And who here has knee problems? I know I do. Oh, right there. We're going to get in there. If this were a beef, we would have a lot of synovial fluid coming out right now. But what we want to do is we want to pull that bone that constitutes the kneecap off. We're getting into that joint. And then this line and this line right along that femur bone are going to give us the sirloin tip, also known as the knuckle. I'm going to switch to a bigger knife. And you're just going to run right down that femur bone. Can you see that okay? Right down that femur bone. Nice and clean. Nothing wasted. You see the ball of the femur. We can come out. Now we've got our sirloin tip, sirloin knuckle. I'm going to cut that hunk of bone off. You can peel this off. And if this were a beef, we'd have our little tiny tri-tip. But what I like with this cut is it's pretty darn consistent. If you wanted something that could be used as a roast, it would make a fantastic roast, especially you get that trussed up a bit. But what I like is it's this little meat football which cures very consistently, and I'll turn that into a nice ham. I'll cure that, I'll smoke that. Now, this is a small animal. On a 300-pound pig, it's this big. And you're talking something that they probably modeled like the Hormel Cure 81 ham right off of that cut there. So that's the sirloin tip knuckle. But now by pulling that kneecap off, I can get into the joint. We've got our tibula fibula and our femur connection right here. So what I'm going to do, I'm using my butcher's grip and I'm going to shove that in and puncture that nerve that connects those two bones. And I can take that right to the table. So this whole shank area, that can be deboned, that can be used as stock. If this went through scald and scrape, with this pierce area right here, I would typically saw that out and discard this, because when you're doing a scald and scrape, they go into the water with their intestines intact, and sometimes a little poop gets out when they go into that 150-degree water. So I would typically discard that. This went through an industrial scalder, I'm betting. This was a very quick process, a very clean process. Again, I'm really stoked that they were able to source this animal, because typically the only way we get skin on pork is when we do it ourselves. Yeah. So we've got this right here. We're just going to roll out the femur bone. Brian, is there any use for the femur? Hold that mic up so people can hear you.
What, for the femur bones?
Yeah, what would you do with that?
What, femur bones?
Yeah.
Stock them down. That's all we do with them. But
I'm just going to roll that out.
We made Shawn Kelly a big ramen fan a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, yeah. Well, a while back in March. Now, Whole bone, you got the marrow inside. So what I would typically do, have a little help from my friend, grab that saw. Oh. That goes on the blooper reel. Hold that saw. There we go. So now you've got the marrow exposed. You roast that maybe 400 degrees with some onions and garlic. Let that come right out, or throw it into a stock pot. Blows your mind. All right. So now we've got the round here. This is the last little bit of this critter because they didn't give us the head. Oh, I didn't come out ahead. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here. I'm going to trim this heel meat away. Right in here. So this is the heel meat, and this is essentially like your calf muscle, okay? We're going to pull this out. Now, when we've been butchering beef lately, we've been trying to get into different cuts, and we found a cut called the Merlot steak, which is actually the larger of the muscles within the heel. So you would pull this off, and it's the one with all of the nasty connective tissue. Isn't that the way? It's like always the most tender, delicious cut.
The more work it takes to get to
is the one with all of the worst connective tissue, right?
Yep.
But you pull that tough, nasty silver skin off. And I did this with my kids. Not to my kids, with my kids.
Poor Emily.
We butchered a pig, and we had all enjoyed the Merlot steak with the beef, so I did, let's do a pork Merlot steak, right?
Yeah.
They loved it. They loved it. I put it head to head against pork chops. And this is getting to be mushy as all get out right now, but that has all that connective tissue and the other muscle. But that's it. That's your little pork Merlot steak. We'll end up sending that guy to grind, but it lets you show stuff that at the local processors might always end up either being cured as ham or thrown into the grind. If you get creative and if you spend some time on this task, you can actually find different steaks, and it can be from fairly inexpensive cuts. So here we are getting into the full round here. We've got 3 parts to our round. You've got this outside really round portion here. That's our top round. As we go into this seam, you're going to get the camera in here if you can see this. Hopefully you'll see this seam. So you've got the top round, you've got the eye of round. On a larger pig, we would cross-cut this, put it through the tenderizer a couple times, dredge it in flour and some super hot spice, make some pork cutlets out of that. But you can pull that all out. So we've got our top round. We've got our eye of round. On beef, I love the eye of round for jerky. Absolutely fantastic, really consistent. I'll pull all that connective tissue off. In fact, any of your round jerky. With our bottom round, you have this flat area, and then it comes up to a peak. If I'm going to do whole muscle curing with it, I want to try to keep things consistent. So I'll typically get rid of that flat, and then I'll trim this up, and I'll have that bottom round turned into a nice ham. So that'll make a nice ham. This, probably chunk it up for stew meat. And then that eye of round is really a fairly nice and consistent round cut, and that will lend itself really well to whole muscle curing and smoking as well. If you weren't going to cure it and smoke it, what would you do with this?
I would just rub it down with a whole lot of mustard and thyme and just roast it off.
Roast it. Nice. Well, that's a side of pork. even if you're not going to harvest your own animals, you can buy a side of pork fairly inexpensively and then just practice, right? It's if you screw up, worst case scenario, you turn it into sausage. Or you make some of the awesome pasta dishes that the chefs have made here today. Or you make carnitas. You can do so many things. I've had students that had actually discarded animals that were injured or whatnot because they didn't know the cuts. And I'm like, that's such a waste. Put it through the grinder.
Anything, you have sausage.
Have sausage or slice it thin or roast it. But things are getting really expensive at the grocery stores. If you learn this, I mean, I just took up a small amount of counter space. You could probably do this in your home kitchen if you had a really understanding spouse.
About an hour and a half.
How long are we?
About an hour and a half.
Hour and a half. We did a side of pork, and we were going slow because I'm trying to get good camera angles and talk to you guys. But hopefully you enjoyed what we just went through. Some of the tools that we were using today, F-Dick cleavers, I love those. I like diamond steels for keeping the knives sharp. If you're gonna get into butchery, this is a 16-inch packer saw. Go for the one with the cantilever on it. It's usually the perfect solution unless Brian's pushing it into the table, and then it will release on you. But the ones that they sell at some of the sporting goods stores with a screw that you tighten, those aren't gonna keep as tight as a cantilever. And then when you do your clean out, you do wanna make sure that you kind of floss it, because that meat's gonna get in there and that's gonna start stinking, and you don't want that. You wanna keep everything safe and sanitary. But I mean, this saw here is about $50, right? So $50 for that. If I only had one knife to work with doing butchery, I would get a Victorinox or a Dexter. It's just a stamped 6-inch boning knife. You can get these even on Amazon for about $25. The other knife I have here for when I need to get a little bit more control, work in tighter spaces, especially when I'm eviscerating, 5-inch Victorinox boning knife. And we just had Amy Kelly arrive, the crunchy mama herself. All right. Again, about 25 bucks. I didn't use it here, but for skinning just about everything from rabbits up to beef, I'll use a Victorinox or a Dexter lamb skinner. Again, 25 bucks, right? So the scabbard, another thing that I like just to have that muscle memory, always putting your knife away. It's not bouncing around the table when I'm smashing things with the dead blow hammer. 12 bucks, inexpensive, you're on your way. You get a pig fairly cheaply, break it down, took us less than an hour and a half today, and now you're creating cuts that might be going for $12 to $15 at the farmer's market if it's a heritage breed hog. So there are ways you can save money without even having a full butcher operation. Does anybody have any questions here about any of the process or anything we do, or we've got a chef here cooking, geek out. How can we help y'all?
Shawn, I'm going to tell you, I've been doing this for 17 years. I don't know that I've ever learned as much from a presentation at the Celebrity Chef stage as I did today from you. That was incredible.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Amazing work. You are such a talent. Ladies and gentlemen, also it's crunchymamafarms.com. You can go have the experience at the farm. They'll take you through. Help me out, Shawn, from a Friday to a Monday, Friday to a Sunday?
We do Friday through Sunday typically. Our next, well, we have gluten-free sourdough the 7th, and that's a morning class. That's $40. We have our next hog class, which we still have a few seats available for. That's Friday the 13th through Sunday the 15th. We're gonna have to do something fun with that. Friday the 13th through Sunday the 15th of June. That's $625. And what we do is we're going to be harvesting 3 Idaho pasture pigs that are going to be roughly 250 to 280 pounds. Grass, they're on pasture, soy-free, non-GMO ration. They're working their muscles, so it's going to be almost a red meat, a lot of flavor. And we're going to have this guy and Luca cooking for us for all 3 days. So it's the ultimate farm to fork, where we're going to harvest the animals. Students will be very hands-on with just about everything but the shot, which I'll handle. And we go through the entire process. We don't force anybody to do anything. It's just push your boundaries, learn where your food comes from, learn how to do a humane harvest, and then after you eat all the meals, we're going to have Chef Ken Daniels, who's a sommelier, come out, and he's going to be doing some signature cocktails and a fireside bourbon tasting on Saturday.
Wow.
You're dead. You're still dead. But that class is $625, and you leave with a quarter of a hog to take home.
And it's all at crunchymamafarms.com.
Yep.
They can find all of the data that they need. Going to be a pretty unlucky day for the pig, I would think.
They have
Friday the
one
13th.
bad day. The way we try to do it is so they have their bad day, but they don't even know that it was their bad day.
They've probably got Friday the 13th circled on their calendar. How about a big hand for Shawn Kelly and our friends at crunchymamafarms.com. Fantastic, Chef. Thank you so much. Chef Brian Santiago as well, thank you very much. Always good to have you with us here at ZestFest. We have some tasting over with Chef Dana at the Celebrity Chef stage demo area. I say that 5 times real fast. But again, Shawn, thank you. Always a pleasure. Again, I've have never learned as much in one 90-minute segment. Thank you. Thanks. I can't say thanks enough.
Yep, and we've got some business cards on the table up here if anybody wants one.
Once again, a big hand for Shawn Kelly, everybody.